Good morning. Can anybody in the back hear me? Great. Okay, well, clearly, I'm not Olga Livingston. I'm Tom Ruoff. And I want to welcome you to the talk this morning. First, we have to go through the disclaimer. And I want to add a couple of disclaimers because our legal folks are here. And number one, I promise not to be lying to you egregiously. Number two, in this talk, we're going to be naming names of some of the products we used. And this is not an endorsement on the part of the Department of Homeland Security, CISA, but we needed to define what products we used to get the data we wanted. So clearly, we're not endorsing, we're informing. Second, in this talk, we're going to be using a lot of acronyms. I ask you, I implore you, have patience. I will explain each of those acronyms. So don't get on your phone, Google, what is CDR? What is an RFC? I will go through that. Last, we have a really packed agenda, and we're going to be moving really fast. Therefore, you can get the slides. We're going to give you the slides after the conference. So hang on, this is going to go very, very quickly. And there's a lot of data, so I'm going to be referring to my notes. So we decided to do this just a little bit differently and give you on this slide the takeaway, because usually you have to wait for, what's the takeaway, what's the call to action. And on the next slide, I'm going to give you the bottom line up front. So the call to action on your part as the customer, because we also probably have vendors out there, is from the information you're going to get here today, demand. Demand the capability that Olga and I are going to be talking about today. That's your job. Go out and say, I want some of that isolation architecture. As the vendor, our call to action is to recognize what we are going to be presenting today is actionable using 100% of COTS products and software. We didn't invent anything. We invented a workflow. Therefore, the call to action on the part of the consumer, please demand, and the part of the vendors is please provide. Now, Dr. Livingston, the economist, said, hey, that's how you have to put it forward. And so that's really our call to action here. Our bottom line up front, and you can see we're so action-packed I have to carry my notes with me, which I usually don't do. Our bottom line up front is we are going to be talking about how to reduce risk content in both email and web. Now, to do this, we first have to define what do we mean by risk content, because we're not talking about malware, we're talking about risk content. And those terms are very specific. So what we mean by risk content is software with the potential to violate the security policy and software that is inappropriate in the placement or impact on the user experience. Could be malware, not defined as malware, but is defined as potential and inappropriate. And that's important because you have to have an assurance of what malware is. So in this talk, we're going to be talking about how we discovered and are enunciated, documented, we'll present to you, and we have reports on it, how we are able to measure risk content, protect against risk content, and third, validate the controls that are in place to do that protection or discovery of risk content. Measure, protect, validate. All about risk content. And through the use of this, our techniques, our workflow, we believe this is actionable and appropriate for you folks. Now, what I want to go through next are the next couple slides. I'm going to be going through goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, then we go into the details. Then Olga will be going through the data. We go through some really crappy slides, and then we summarize. So that's the agenda for today. So goal 1 is measure. We have developed the techniques, again using 100% COTS, for the measurement of risk content in email. That's what we did first because it was the easiest to do, and it's appropriate for doing this also in web. So when we talk about measuring, we want to make sure that this allows you to get a baseline of the malware, the risk content, and once you've established that baseline of the risk content, you can now, part B, you can now make modifications, changes to your controls and measure the effectiveness. Measure, who's in the military? Anybody in the military? Thank you for your service. What's this? The foot stomper, underline it. Measure the effectiveness of the changes in the controls within your system to determine the efficacy. That's a really big deal, okay? That's goal 1 and goal 1A and B. Goal 2, protect. Knowledge is great. Goal 1, understand, get the baseline, measure your changes as you go forward. Goal 2, protect. We want to reduce the risk content in both email and web. And the way that the techniques we used, again, I must foot stomp 100% COTS products, measure the results of this is what we want to be able to provide to you today. So, protect against the delivery of risk content using Serial CDR. So, I made a promise. It's an acronym, we're going to define it. So, Serial CDR is when it's the application of CDR process technology. The output of one is the input to another, which is the input into a third. What our research found is that CDR products, regardless of the name, are highly effective, but they are really, really effective when you use one, then another, or one and another. Whether it's 2 or 3, there is obviously a point of diminishing return. And there's a technical reason for that, which we can share at the booth afterwards. So, I've talked about content disarmament reconstruction. What is that? Well, I'm going to quote Wikipedia, because if I give you my interpretation, it's subjective. But CDR is also called sanitization, so I quote from the Wikipedia. CDR is the computer security technology for removing potentially malicious code, I'm inserting risk content, from files. Unlike malware analysis, CDR does not determine or detect the malware's functionality, but removes all of the components that are not appropriate with the system's definition of the policy. And the system's definition of the policy is found in the RFC. Oh, hey, another acronym. What's an RFC? So if you have a doc, a PDF, a GIF, the structure of that object is defined in the RFC. Who comes up with the RFCs? Anybody know who comes up with RFCs? Raise your hand. IETF, the IETF, another acronym, I wrote it down. Internet Engineering Task Force. So the Engineering Internet Task Force defines a specification for a object, GIF, TIFF, whatever. CDR does the following stuff. It parses, so I'm going to go into a little explanation of CDR. It parses the object according to the RFC. It then deobfuscates, de-encodes, not decrypts, could, generally does not decrypt, it de-encodes, lays that material out on a pallet, applies a set of rules about what is appropriate for the object based upon the RFC. It then removes or puts into a new container, puts it back together again, sends it on its way. CDR is about the appropriate content based upon the RFC. Now, I keep using these terms of risk content because what we're trying to get to in protection is the removal of risk content to reduce the likelihood of a policy violation. Okay, so I went through goal number 2. Goal number 3, which we'll get into a little bit later in the talk, is all about how you can stress test or calibrate the system using known input. So if I have an email system or I have a web content platform, which we'll get to later, if I have a platform that's supposed to remove this content, how about if I put in a couple 100,000 known good? So if I put in 100,000 known good and I get 100,000 known good back, what's my, that tells me what my false positive rate is, right? Well, how about if I then subject it to a curated set of malware? What goes in, what do I get back? You get the idea. And so we really feel that validating the controls in goal 3 is part of the research we talked about. So, this is where we're going to go real fast. Here is the recipe for what we did. Currently, what we've looked at is, and if I talked about this in terms of measuring risk content, the opposite of that is, hey, I pay as much money as my budget can handle. I'm really hoping that I'm going to get some effectiveness. What we're suggesting is, why don't we turn this upside down, and instead of paying and praying, you pay and measure to determine the level of risk content is there, and then modify your controls as we talked about in goal 1B, okay? Now, the way that we did this, and again, so the next slide really is a how did we do it. So they're going to be in the slides, you can get them later. This is our recipe. Collect a bunch of samples, put them on the platform, boom, you're done, right? Well, I want to stress is that this was all done offline. The reason we did it offline is, number one, Department of Homeland Security, going and putting something in line. You can imagine that takes a lot of time. What we've done in all our trials is we do it offline. Therefore, we were able to move very swiftly through the trials with our partners. Here's the second workflow. Again, collect a bunch of samples. And again, this is the workflow that we put this together with. The effectiveness workflow is very similar. You do the detection. Now, if you look in step number 3, modify your controls and determine that effectiveness. Modify your controls and determine the effectiveness against the baseline you did in 1A, okay? Now, protect. Same recipe, except now we're taking the platform and putting it in line. So you measure the before, content comes in, you measure the before, you do the serial CDR, you measure the risk content in the CDR processed, and that tells you the effectiveness, and you're passing it along. So what we've talked about, and you'll see in the diagrams that are coming, and you got to wait, these are really good diagrams. A little humor there, because you'll see. So we have the before and after measurement, and you're going to be able to see then not only you're protecting, but you're measuring the level of the protection elements you have, and you're able to determine the effectiveness of those controls if you throw in part B. So at this point, I'm turning it over to Dr. Livingston to give you all of the details.
So what's this workflow that we're talking about? It's actually fairly straightforward. What you do is collect email, strip the attachments. Attachments is what your sample is. And then you send the sample through the workflow. So first step in the workflow, static analysis. We use the reversing labs. As Tom mentioned, we're not endorsing any particular vendor. The workflow is modular. You can substitute licenses that fit the capability. But you want to understand, so often criticism comes that whatever you do, results are design specific. Therefore, full disclosure what we use because you understand the limitations of how it works. So first step is reversing lab for static analysis. Whatever gets flagged as a risk content or files that potentially have risk content, then we send into dynamic analysis. And that's CrowdStrike Falcon Sandbox. Then we see what behaves well or does not behave in the Falcon Sandbox, and we get count of the files that are suspicious, malicious versus benign. Then we take the whole set that got flagged in static analysis and send it through CDR, so the sausage maker. We used, so the licenses, the way we used it was Glasswall, OpsWord, and Purifile. Everything that comes out, CDR'd, sanitized, then goes back into static analysis. Because remember, I want the before measurement, I want the exact same after measurement. So it goes back into static analysis. We get the file counts that are potential risk content, and then whatever crept out in the dynamic analysis first time through goes back into dynamic analysis. So we have, again, comparable before after. This way we get A, measurement of risk content, that incoming, and B, we have a effectiveness of the controls. In our particular setup, we happened to use CDR because we had a hunch that it would be effective, and it turned out that yes, and we ran several pilots on it. So now we have evidence-based approach to deciding whether controls work and whether we want to invest in it. So the idea here is that it's a very straightforward orchestration There is a technical report describing it. If you are interested in more details, you can find me later in the bar or read the report. Reading the report might be less taxing on your psyche. So with that, why serial CDR? So we built and tested this setup, right? Natural questions like, are there other tricks, other controls you can use? Absolutely. You can put whatever you want in the stack, but this is where we thought we can get good effectiveness, which proven to be the case. So two key things is first, measure risk content in the incoming email, and then second is we have a pre and post CDR results, so we get a measurement of the control's effectiveness out of it. And we ran 2 pilots. One was at 2019 at DHS ESOC, and the second pilot I ran in 2021 at a university. So I'll talk in detail about what we observed there. So again, why serial CDR? Because we have tested performance results, confirming it works, and we understand the ranges of effectiveness. Based on static analysis results, remember the before and after, right? We have a 98% risk content reduction. Based on the dynamic analysis results, Falcon Sandbox, we have 52 to 74% reduction. Natural question is why such a range? We had different tenants with the different initial baselines, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And also, one tenant had more PDFs than the other, and PDF are notoriously hard to handle. So there is an answer that's like, well, you can flatten the file, write to PostScript, distill it back. The argument against it is you lose functionality. So you don't want to do it for all of your PDFs, but for the stubborn subset, that might be an appropriate solution. We have not done that. We just really focused on counting before-afters, so we have no-nonsense, repeatable method for doing controls effectiveness. So orchestrated workflow I mentioned before, and this is to emphasize, everything is COTS. What we've done is we Frankenstein it together in a particular workflow, but everything is COTS. All these licenses are available to you, and we have a reference architecture that tells you how to string them together. Reversing labs for static is what we used, CrowdStrike for dynamic, and then Glasswool Ops Web Purify. So we've observed significant reduction in risk content in email, and what that implies, you can decrease malware. What's the use case? Immediate use case is ransomware, right? The ransomware that comes in that's packed in the attachment. So we're not talking about phishing links in the body of the email. That's a different type of analysis. We're not talking about the behavioral analysis of a text to see if there is a social engineering attempt. We're talking specifically about attachments. So things that are packed in the attachments that shouldn't be there. You know, some URL in white text somewhere baked in something in the picture. So things that should not be or do not belong in a well-behaved file based on the standard format for each file type. So to emphasize, we have a way to measure risk content, and we have a way to measure the controls effectiveness for a particular setup or solution that we analyzed. I start with describing the results for the recent pilot that I ran. So this was a university, and they had 2 tenants. One was Microsoft 365, another one was 365A5. So the first sample was 33,000 files, unique files, and I'll emphasize or explain why that is important. And then the second sample was 70,000 files. So we deduped the files to make sure that we're not double counting. That implies that whatever results we get, it's a conservative lower bound, right? So we're not counting the files that were resent within the sample period multiple times, and we're not counting the files that were sent to multiple inboxes, right, during the sample period of time. So it's a unique file count, which means it's a conservative lower bound. It's at least that. And here are some of the results. So I won't bore you with numbers, but they're there for a reason. Because natural question is like, okay, that's a sample size. How does that relate to overall traffic, site traffic? So here we had overall 9 million emails on student tenant, and then 3.5 million emails on the faculty tenant. So 12.5 million altogether. Stripped attachments. There were correspondingly 160,000 attachments coming through in that email traffic, so 2 weeks. And then we deduped the attachments the way I explained. So we've ended up with 30,000 attachments, unique attachments, and 70,000 correspondingly. And some of you might say, it's like, well, this, I don't know, this is not large enough of a sample. Absolutely, this is not law of large numbers, this is law of small numbers. Because we have theoretically just a handful of non-generalizable case studies. So we want to be very careful that this is a conservative estimate based on the data that we had. Certainly you can do more. For some agencies, this is like 5 minutes of Tuesday morning traffic. For other organizations, that's 2 weeks or more. So it depends. We're very open about what we've done and how we've done it, but the encouragement is, well, how much evidence do you need? Workflow is available to you, reference architecture is available to you, so if you'd like to replicate it, you certainly can. Bottom line, in the third, so I'm going to go through the student tenant column, and you can then interpret the employee tenant by analogy just to understand how you read the table. So in these 33,000 files that we've got, 2,000 got flagged by static analysis as potential risk content. Those 2,000 then go into dynamic analysis. And the dynamic analysis results show that out of that 2,000, 86 were no-nonsense, suspicious and malicious files. So then that 2,000 goes into CDR, into our sausage maker. And then we do the same measurement when it comes out. So when it comes out, post-CDR, post-sanitization, when we reconstituted each file based on the standard file format and said, okay, does this belong in a well-behaved file? Yes, I understand what it means. This is margins, this is font colors, reconstituted here. What's this thing? I don't know. I do not know whether it's bad, but I know that it does not belong in the file spec. Therefore, I'm not reconstituting it here. Now, don't drop that because that can go into threat intel analysis. Point is, once you reconstitute it on the other side, do the exact same measurement. We've done static analysis again, so your 2,000 now are reduced to like 40, and then we've done dynamic analysis again, where the 86 reduced to 22. So, two things that you immediately observe. Based on the static analysis results, that's the 98% effectiveness that I mentioned earlier. And then based on the dynamic analysis results, you have 74% risk content reduction. But what does that imply for risk content in the incoming traffic? Well, that 33,000 is our sample size. 6%, 6.3% got flagged by RL, by static analysis. And then out of that, 4% was no-nonsense, malicious, suspicious files. So that means at least 2.6 per 1,000 unique files. So this is a conservative lower bound, and I'm not saying good or bad, I don't know what your risk tolerance is, but at least are you aware of what's coming in through your system right now? So what we observed is on student tenant was 2.6 malicious suspicious, no nonsense malicious suspicious per 1,000 unique files, and on the faculty tenant with a higher security baseline, which is Microsoft 365 A5, and at the time it was O365, just rebranding happened, so we're using the terms that were relevant to the pilot. And we're seeing that, okay, 2.6, 2.2, again, I don't know if it's high or not. Do you have a risk tolerance, and do you know what's coming in now? So are you aware what's coming through your system now? You can A, measure the risk content, and then B, do control effectiveness or whatever you choose to do with this. So next slide. Summary of the summary, that's just a reminder and future reference. So A, serial CDR works. We see what the risk content reduction results are. And then B, we know what the incoming risk content is for these tenants. So you can at the very least replicate the risk content measurement and then decide on what you want to do with controls. So let's go a little bit into results of an earlier pilot at DHS ESOC. Similar table, but this gives you a sense of what file types we looked at. And as you can see, the PDFs are the ones that cause the most grief. But result here is repeatable. Again, rough order of magnitude, we do have 229 files out of 28,000 that were no-nonsense, suspicious, malicious, and that got reduced to 15. So you have 93% risk reduction. And then what does imply for the risk content in the incoming email? That's almost 1%. That's kind of high. From where we sit and the email traffic that we get, but then it's based on your risk tolerance to decide what's suitable for your particular agency, site, or company. So again, 0.8 and then post-CDR, we have an order of magnitude reduction, right? We went to 0.05 risk content post-analysis. And we mentioned earlier that you can apply this at scale, and this is how you do it. So it's fairly straightforward. Harvest the email sample, dedupe it, put it in a static analysis. Whatever gets flagged in a static analysis goes in a dynamic analysis. That's your risk scoring or measurement. So then everything that got flagged in static goes through CDR or whatever controls that you choose to use. And then you see what the risk content is. So in our case, it was 2.6. I don't know, high or low, your risk tolerance, you decide. So set the risk tolerance and then decide whether it's palatable. If it is, you're good. You do nothing and you already have the measurement, you accept the risk. If you want to do something about it, it's outside of your tolerance, then try the controls, right? In our case, we did email protection CDR, but there are other things that you can evaluate, and you can do a combination of controls. We just looked at CDR. So again, then take the email sample post-processing, go through static dynamic again, and now you have the before and after. And you keep doing that up until the residual risk content is what you're comfortable with. So summary of the summary here is that you can apply this at scale. We've done it offline, but that could be done inline, and that's the intent here. So reference architecture is available. We have a technical report. Now, once you apply that at scale, natural question is, well, what about performance degradation and keeping up with the evolving threat? And that requires ongoing testing. We call it stress testing. And that's what Tom's going to talk about.
Thank you. Before we leave this, this is a control system, right? Control system. You measure the input, you make modifications, it's a control system. Do we think about email, web security as a control system? Or do we think about it as pay and pray? That's what we talked about in an earlier slide of turning things upside down. And I challenge you, it's a takeaway, right? I challenge you to think about email, web, cybersecurity as a control system once you can measure. And that's one of our big takeaways. Okay, so let's think about how we can stress test this. It's a control system. I'm making 2x4s in a lumberyard, right? Is my 2x4 a 2x4 or 2x8? I don't know. Okay, well, how do you measure? How do you stress test? How do you put known input and output? What we're suggesting in goal 3 here is that as part of your security system, you stress test. You put in known good, known bad. You determine the efficacy of your controls because you can measure. Now, is this easy to do? Maybe. Kind of hard. But we have extremely high confidence that this can be done because a couple of the vendors who we've worked with have done this and shared the results of this kind of stress testing for common email systems. You can get a hold of me at the booth and I can share the results with you. But this is possible. It's technically feasible. Seems to be economically justifiable. Depends upon the vendor who does this. So I come back to the 2 things we're asking you to do when you charge out of this room. As a consumer, go demand some of this, and as a vendor, go provide it. But this, we think, is an important part of thinking about and constructing your security system as a control system. Okay? Now, we want to up the ante on this because we're thinking, and this is the up the ante, well, I talked about email. Why not think about this for web systems as well? Think about web content. Well, how would you do that? Well, right now, if you think you have you're taking all of your web content, you're executing on your browser, you're hoping, oh my gosh, that's not so good. What we're suggesting is move your content to a virtual browser, and now you're able to do everybody know what a virtual browser is? Please, dear God, raise your hand if you know what it is. Okay, real quick, virtual browser. You map your current browser that is in your current system to a cloud-based virtual environment that renders your web session in a sandbox up in the cloud, right? That's why it's virtual. And what you get down are pixels, pictures of the virtual sandboxed browser. And what you send up is keyboard strokes, okay? So what you get to your endpoint is pictures. How much risk content is in a pixel or a picture of a rendered sandbox? It depends on the instantiation. If it's done in software, you still maintain a risk because software can be manipulated. If it's done in hardware, the risk of that approach is orders of magnitude lower. Come and see me later. Some folks have done that. But in a virtual browser, you're reducing or you're addressing that exploitable attack surface. Now, why am I bringing this up? Am I shamelessly advocating virtual browsers? Yes. But the platform that we built, the platform we have advocated, allows you to take that picture of the pretty kitty you've accessed in the virtual browser. Everybody likes pictures of pretty kitty, right? Yeah, you want to print it out, you want to put it on your notebook, whatever. Or you got the Excel spreadsheet or the PDF, or you want to integrate content on your endpoint. How do you get that from the virtual browser to your endpoint? Well, the platform that we have designed, built, tested for email, you can then use as a secure save as process to take the object, put it into the same platform we did for email, measure the risk content, serial CDR it, measure the risk content, send it in its happy way. You can do email, you can do web, you can do FTP. This approach we've taken of measure, protect, and stress is applicable to any kind of email, of any kind of cybersecurity process, any kind of element. Now, you as a how many American U.S. taxpayers are in this room? Raise your hand. You pay U.S. tax, okay? I know you pay U.S. tax. You should be so happy at the amount of funding and thought that went into these graphics, because this is not where we spent your money. I'm here to tell you, okay?
Thanks, Tom.
Well, I mean, you got to call it like you see it, right? Because somebody's going to say, well, these are like the worst graphics I've ever seen. This is not where we spend our time and effort, but it's a communication method. So this is what you have today, 50,000-foot view, right? And this is the summary of the graphical summary. So you have your email, it's being processed, whatever, it comes to your endpoints, you got a web server, you're gratuitously going to different websites, that content's being rendered on your web server, it's rendered on your endpoint, you click on the wrong thing, you have a bad day, right? Everybody's worried about clicking on the wrong thing, having a bad day. You have a link inside an email, click on the wrong thing, you have a bad day. Click on something in the attachment, click on it, you have a bad day. Okay, well, in email, the cloud-based automation platform that Olga and I have talked about, the email goes in, it's detected, it's serial CDR'd, it's sent back, boom, done. Has a latency that we estimate, depends upon, it really all depends upon the instantiation, but it has a latency of something like 1/2 to 3/4 of a second. Why? Because we're just taking the original file, sending it through serial CDR, boom, it comes back. Not in the operational line we envision would be the detection before and after. That would occur offline. Why? Because you got to get the email to the users. So this is the email part of the isolation. Now, this is the big picture. You take your endpoints, your endpoint browsers, you map it to the virtual browser up in the cloud, and you can just click the heck away, right? Fine. Somebody gives me some email, some link in an email. I get some email in a text, some link in a text. I got it in my body, in my attachments. Click away. As a matter of fact, somebody should be paying you to click, because if you do, we now get the threat intelligence because you're detecting. So the way that we see this as, you get the email, sanitize, using CDR, you sanitize it, we get the threat intelligence. The virtual browser, you're clicking away. Oh, I got now those browser logs, that's gold, right? I want to do the save as, so I hit save as. It goes to the same platform, the exact same process, because an object's an object, right? A PDF's a PDF, whether it's an attachment or whether it's in a website I'm trying to download. It goes in, processed, stored, goes back down through your usual file manager. You have a great day. This is the platform we are advocating you to demand, because now we're thinking about this as a control system that protects, okay? So, are you guys now really happy with the amount of funding your Department of Homeland Security spent on graphics? God, I hope so, because we spent an awful lot of time doing the analytics and the engineering thought processes on this. So, Olga.
Yeah, and Tom, if you want to try to pawn this off on our august audience, we need to stop saying that it's difficult. It's a fairly straightforward workflow. Static analysis first, dynamic analysis second. That's the part that measures your risk content. Then in the sausage maker it goes, that's serial CDR. When it comes out, we do it again. Static analysis, dynamic analysis. So we have both risk content measurement before, risk content measurement after, and controls effectiveness. That, if you're a consumer, allows you to establish a business case for it, right? So, and it has all these wonderful other benefits. Besides reducing ransomware immediately, if you wrap it up in the virtual browser Todd mentioned, then you can prevent the old C2 from dialing out. It's one of the benefits. And here's a business case of how to communicate the need for funding for this specific set of trinkets. So, benefit analysis, and we have benefits that could be directly quantifiable. I have a couple slides with numbers to help you with that. Also, you have indirect or benefits that are quantifiable but not necessarily monetizable, meaning you cannot directly translate it into business relevant units, dollars. Nevertheless, we tried. So what are all the benefits other than reducing the risk content, right? So we have complete set of logs from virtual browser. We have complete set of logs from CDR. And also, whatever got dropped and not passed as part of sanitization, that goes in the CHEF, right? That's your threat intel analysis. That's where you stick ML/AI. That's our coin for the day. Yes, so this is where if you wanted to do meaningful analytics about what's coming through, that's the set that you want to analyze. And then we have other aspects of this. So primary TTPs for ransomware. Primary delivery TTPs for ransomware are email and web services. Well, that takes care of that. Also, another way to add to the business case for cost-benefit analysis, you do have bandwidth cost savings. And that's the results that we've got in discussing this and working with DISA. They actually instituted web browser for these purposes, for bandwidth. And then there are auxiliary benefits off of that. And then what I mentioned earlier is that the exhaust of the CDR is what can feed your threat intel. And then the old contamination, old command and control would not be dialing out if you wrap your system in this isolation architecture. So what are we trying to get at? Is the takeaway is all these are mature licenses. Everything that we used is COTS. We just Frankensteined it in a particular way. We have a technical report to reach out. We'll help you implement it. We'll just guide you through as to how to do it. Licenses that you can use, it's your choice, just as long as it meets the requirements. The workflow is modular. So if it meets capability requirements, the way it's set up is you can switch out to the licenses that you prefer. We've run pilots with the different security baselines, and both pilots have fairly consistent results. We won't call them robust because still fairly small samples depending on what your email traffic looks like. Nevertheless, we've done a couple pilots. We've done it under different security baselines, and we've got the effectiveness data out of it. So this is isolation architecture works. It's technically feasible. We tried it. It's also economically justifiable. I've done the back envelope analysis on the cost and the break-even point. The benefit of if you decide not to do CDR, at the very least, measure what's the risk content is in the incoming email. Because is that the question that can be answered readily today? Not necessarily. We have the view of the agencies, and that's not particularly the case. So the call to action here is, if you're a potential consumer, everybody who can do this, they are on the floor today. They're on the floor tomorrow. Talk to your vendors, talk to your service providers, ask for this capability. And all it is them talking to each other and Frankenstein these licenses together in the way that we've discussed and using this orchestration workflow. If you are a vendor, you already have these licenses. Please consider using them in that particular way and offer it to your customers. So this is economics 101. We need a demand signal from the customers, for the suppliers, for the producers of this, providers of this, to have adoption rate that makes sense for them economically to offer it at scale. So please ask your providers for this tech. And then static and dynamic analysis is something that's available to you off the shelf to measure the incoming risk content. So that's the key takeaway, is that we need to help the market to start adopting this. I'm not aiming towards best practices, but at the very least, do we have a repeatable controls effectiveness, repeatable method for measuring controls effectiveness? No, that's something that we struggle with at the industry. So it's not a naming and shaming, it's a recognized gap. Well, here's a repeatable method to do something for email and web downloads or web services. So please use that, and we can cross-compare results from various sites. Key here is that we never touch your email. All email stays on the system. All we got out of the pilots is the counts of files, counts of suspicious malicious, and then pre-CDR, post-CDR. So at no point in time we touched anybody's email, which means that if you run this, I'd like to know how it came out on your site. Call to action is, please, this is commercial software, mature software. Ask for the licenses, ask your vendors to provide this capability, and to help you build the business case, I've included a couple sets of numbers here. That's analysis that we've done. You don't, again, graphics. So point here is that here's your what-if analysis, how many incidents versus cost per incident. And this is a little bit dated because there was 2 years before, 2 years ago before I've done the 2021 pilot. On my LinkedIn, I shared the report that we've done jointly with Scientia, so co-labeled with CISA. It has cost of the incidents by sector, by business size. So please use that information to inform your cost-benefit analysis and your what-if scenarios. But you have enumeration of benefits. Again, this is just for reference. You have enumeration of benefits, and then for the portion that's quantifiable, recognize limitation, right? For the portion of quantifiable, you have suggestions as to what benefits you can communicate. And then for the monetizable, here you can use these numbers to calculate loss avoidance. And it's loss avoidance dependent on the sector, loss avoidance dependent on the business size, because the cost of the incident varies quite a bit depending who you are. So that was there just for your reference. On LinkedIn, I have the new report shared. And we have a technical report on this reference architecture. So please use, abuse. We'd really encourage the industry and the consumers to consider this as a viable solution, because we know it's technically effective, and we know it can be economically justifiable.
Just a couple of things we forgot to do, that I forgot to do. So I'm going back just to the beautiful slide here. And Olga mentioned it, but we completely forgot about IAML, right? We're RSA. How can we have a talk without IAML? Can't do it. So if we think about where that fits in, if we're doing the virtual browser, you get the logs, that's a set of data. We have, for everything that we go through with the static and dynamic, that's a set of data. So where is the opportunity for IAML? From the wealth of information that is being collected in the browser logs and in the static and dynamic reports. So there, I think we've fully covered. Now we're buzzword compliant, everybody's happy. CISA talked about IAML, and now we're cool, we can wear a hoodie. At this point, are there any questions?
Concerns, grievances?
Yes, questions, please. Because we talked fast so we can get to the questions.
So in the meantime, right, while I wait for Microsoft or whoever manages my email to implement this, what can I do to implement this sort of thing?
Go to your, so I'll take this one.
And I can,
Okay,
yeah.
Go to your systems administrator and ask them to download the last 2, 3, 4 weeks worth of email in some format, PST, whatever it is. Get that off to the side. Go get yourself some static and dynamic tools that would crawl through those. And we can give you the script afterwards to do that. It's just an orchestration script. But now you have a set of files that would come out of the saved off last 2, 3 weeks worth of email. Feed that into your static tool. Anything that then hits a threshold, feed into your dynamic, and that's how you can get your threshold. Or call some consultant company who can wire this together for you. But you have the data. All your email systems will save off that email. That's your data source. Now you're just looking for the platform to go do that. And you can do that with your systems administrator for your organization. How you go and build this thing, this is the point where you got to get a vendor to be able to get you the orchestrated workflow. But you could wire it together. Come and see me after the booth. This is all public domain information that we can share with you.
And it's fairly straightforward. We do have report discussing it, and the orchestration is what we're...
Yeah, this is an orchestrated workflow using common APIs. Yes, ma'am.
You may have answered my question with what you just responded to, but I work with SMBs. They barely have budget for any one of your analytical tools. And I know CISA has done great work in helping small business with a lot of the material you've produced. So how can small and mid-sized businesses with a fraction of the budget do any of this? Or is that in the works? Is that maybe 2.0 of this work?
May I take this one? So the idea here is that for a particular type of customers, the direct adoption might be most beneficial. But for others, you want to go with a force multiplier. So it's where SMBs go for service. So yeah, it's like when I open the fridge, I want the light to come up. I don't want to think about how Freon flows in the back, right? So it's same idea is that this is where it's MSPs and ISPs that need to provide a service. And its service needs to be that's baked in. So this is where working with the force multipliers in the industry, not to have SMBs pay for it, per nose $5 at a time, but if we have this group aggregation, right, we have the level of adoption where the price per license would go down. So working with SMBs and their service providers and having that shared arrangement is where it could be very beneficial. So we recognize that SMBs don't have bandwidth to deal with this. It's not even the top priority. Cybersecurity is business support function, after financing, securing talent and whatnot. And also for SMBs, cost of the cyber incident, even though it's relatively low across all the industries. With SMBs, and that's in the report that I earlier mentioned, it's free, no pay, nothing. Just download it and look. For SMBs, that's where the relative cost of the incident as compared to the budget is actually the highest. We're going 60%, 65, 70%. So for SMBs, even though per incident cost is lower, it's much higher number relative to their revenue or annual budget. So this is where I would advocate, well, I shouldn't advocate, but I think the natural arrangement would be going one level higher in the food chain, make sure that it's baked in service from those where SMBs go to water. But so good question, because I'm presenting all these results as yeah, I can do a couple experiments. At the end of the day, I can lead the horse to the water. I'm not the horse, right? So here's the performance results. Here's the orchestration workflow. What other evidence do you need for adoption? Please let us know. In the meantime, how can we have this arrangement where certain set or level of services is provided further upstream in the service, in the food chain?
And just to pile on that, two people have said, how do I get some? That's the demand. Where's the supply? We think that there's a demand. Now the question is supply. Sir.
Hi. Please don't take this as any challenge. I think this is good work and very valuable. But your comparison and your test shown against output from Microsoft 365 mail system made me want to ask if you have any information in your technical report, or did you look at the comparative result versus what was landing on inbound on M365 versus what went through the system in the end. So basically, how much of a gain versus the total threat was there?
I could take it from my pilot and.
Well, just real quick, we didn't take a look at what was into the protected system because that was going to be humongous. We asked what is the net exposure at the endpoint, and that's what we tried to measure. Now, we're not saying that any system, whether it's Microsoft, Gmail, is not has effective controls. We're looking at the net exposure that gets delivered and what can be done at that net exposure. Yes, there is those controls are effective. We're looking at the net effectiveness. Olga?
So in the risk management terms, that would be residual income, right? So it's a delivered email, which means it's past your iron ports and whatever you have in the stack. So it's what appeared in users' inboxes. So it's residual risk for what you already have. Now, if you're treating this as a controls effectiveness analysis for CDR or anything else you want to stack on top, at this point, it's your before, that's your inherent. Then you add CDR, you do after. But so it's not everything that's coming out of you and out in the wild. It's past your stack already, past your controls already. So it's delivered risk content. And again, deduped and whatnot, so a conservative lower bound.
Thank you. I just understand my perspective of the whole aggregate mail protection, content protection program. So thank you.
Yeah, so that would be incremental add-on to what you already have. We're not saying that this is instead of. It's whatever is already getting through, measure, and then add on.
And I think I just want to say, I think there was an implication that the Department of Homeland Security will continue this work, and we're going to publish it on CSET. I don't know that is an expectation that we can justify or we can give you, but I just want to dispel this is the work we've done to date, and this is the work we've done to date. Our message is our message. We're not advocating that CISA, DHS is going to go further with this. We want to share our results to date, okay?
And it's from the standpoint of quantitative marketing and then technology diffusion, right? Different models of adoption decisions being made, but this gives you performance results. This gives you means of doing cost-benefit analysis and business case for CDR or anything else, right? And use the numbers that are there, enumerate the benefits. If this sounds appealing, here's the performance results. If that's something that's timely, useful, and relevant for you, now the adoption decision is on the market, because we do need that demand signal to signal to the vendors that there's going to be a significant capacity that would make sense for them to produce at scale or offer this at scale, and certainly support it.
We have 1 minute left. If there are no other questions, Olga and I will be here until we're chased out, and then we'll be at the CISA booth, which is number...
Find me at the bar.
Okay, well,
I'm done with the booth.
we will be at the CISA booth. I will be at the CISA booth for the next couple hours.
It's number 1435, and it's in the South Hall.
South 1435. Thank you for your patience and your time. Have a nice day.